for that very kind intro. It's a pleasure to be here. Actually, I wasn't planning to give this talk. I was just here for work reasons, and then Ben just randomly DM'd me and he was like, "We're holding a meetup. Do you want to speak?" And sure, I'll come up with something. So this is on my mind recently. If you're here, you probably saw it on the invite. So we're just going to talk about Deno versus Bun. Deno or Deno? I think it is Deno. Anyway, so an important disclaimer first. This is a talk by an outsider who hasn't built anything real with either project. So I think that's important to acknowledge because your level of experience should be disclosed up front, but it shouldn't prevent you from sharing what you know so far. Especially when the project is 8 days old and and no one's really built anything real with it. But I still think that's the kind of stuff that you want to share at a meetup, and then we can just talk about it. That's really it. I'm not an expert. I spent a bunch of time on it, and I'm sharing with you the results so far. Okay. Disclaimer away, I'll just speak authoritatively from now on. So 3 years ago, I talked about the third age of JavaScript. It was a blog post that did really, really well. And what I did essentially was trace the history of JavaScript and the major events and color code it by 4 different color codes. Red would be the standardization, which is ES1, 4, 5, 6, and now we're not even keeping track because they're every year. Blue would be user land libraries. Orange would be build tools, and then green was the runtimes. And the runtimes was increasingly telling the story about the places that JavaScript could run. So Chrome was started in 2007, Node.js in 2009, Electron 2013, React Native 2015, Hermes and Deno 2019, 2020. So just increasingly JavaScript is just spreading all over the place, like a virus. And we have some experience with that. And I thought I was done actually, because Hermes is a very niche JavaScript runtime. And if you don't know, that's Facebook's custom Android runtime to run React Native on Android, specifically made a JS engine just for that. And I was like, all right, this is kind of scraping the bottom of the barrel. But the third age of JavaScript is essentially a thesis about generational shifts based on a few things. I went into more detail at Reactathon, which is the conference that Ben organized, which was amazing, and the venue was just incredible. So you can see that talk online if you wish. But here we're going to update the third age of JavaScript for 2022 with the newest runtime, Bun. All right. So first of all, I think a very important JavaScript principle is don't fix what isn't broke. And I think a number of people you should start off this conversation with some valued skepticism about this attempt to replace Node.js. Like, what's wrong with it? Like, it's working fine. And really, you should listen. Probably the best person to think about that is its creator, Ryan Dahl, who in the last JSConf ever, JSConf EU ever, he actually came out and announced Deno. And he actually talks about a few design mistakes in Node. You can watch the video for more, but he said not sticking to promises because he introduced the error callback continuation passing style, a paradigm that you're used to in Node.js. Security build system using Node.js. If you ever had any issues in Node.js, that's his fault. Having packaged JSON, Node modules, require module, and index.js. All of these were minor little, it got really minor, and he thought it was basically too cute. He was like, these are just quality of life improvements that actually made Node significantly more complex and harder to debug. Later on, he actually wrote more thoughts on Deno versus Node.js. So if you want to, you can read his latest, most updated thoughts on Deno versus Node.js in there. I won't read the slides to you. The table of contents, or what we're going to cover in this talk today, it's a very difficult talk to do. It's one of the hardest talks I had to prepare for, just because it's not like I built anything production. There's so much moving pieces. There's a lot of information to process. So what I think the best service I can do for you, if you're watching, is essentially do a what is, from the ground up introduction, talk about what they share in common because they are similar and competing projects, and then talk about what's different and what is the generalized feature that you should start looking for, the patterns. Meaning if a third or a fourth or a fifth JavaScript runtime came out, what are the patterns that are likely to repeat irrespective of the actual implementation? These are the things that people want or the universe is pulling from the JavaScript community. So Deno, that's a little screenshot of the GitHub over there. It's got some really impressive stats, 84,000 stars, 721 contributors, which is ridiculous. And it's mostly written in Rust with a healthy smattering of JavaScript and TypeScript. It's been around for 4 years. It was announced in May 2018 at that JSConf EU. And exactly 2 years later, Deno 1.0 was released. And then there's been a really interesting evolution since then as a venture-backed company. That is one major departure for Node.js as well. It used to be just kind of like a open source governance body, and now it's an actual venture-backed startup. So 2021 got the seed round, in 2022 got the Series A. A lot of interesting milestones in between. I think I'll highlight to you that Deno is on TC39. It actually is in production at Slack, Superbase, and Netlify. And there's a lot of Hacker News buzz about it. So really, really interesting project. And already 4 years of history behind it. Bun, in comparison, launched 8 days ago. Already 24,000 stars. Used by contributors 88. That contributor counts, I'll show you a little bit of story behind that. Another interesting thing to note about Bun is that it's 60% written in Zig. And like a year ago, I didn't even know what Zig was. And apparently it's a even safer replacement for Rust. I don't know anything about it. I choose not to know anything about it. But I think it's a very interesting evolution of the thesis that most of our JavaScript tooling is going to have some kind of systems language at its core to optimize the hot path and scripting shell for you to have an interface that JavaScript developers can use. Bun's marketing is almost entirely based on speed. Everything is just speed, 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 speed. So server RPS, 260,000 requests per second on macOS, 20 times faster installs. Bun can bundle over 1 million lines of JavaScript. I think when like these numbers in and of itself like are a little bit hard to face, but once you start doing hard comparisons and benchmarks with other runtimes like npm start or Bun start or Deno start, Bun is 2 times faster than Deno and 4.5 times faster than Node 16. And it also has some impressive stats for SSR tests and foreign function interfaces, which by the way was one of the regrets. We talked about JIP being one of the issues there. Ryan in his sort of recap was like, if I just waited to get the foreign function interface right, we wouldn't have to use that. I think the one GIF I can actually show you is this one. So this is kind of how the test runner is marketed. That's the test suite on React, and that's the kind of speed that he's trying to go for. So again, just be aware that this is marketing. These are the tests that he's written, and there are a lot of tests that are not written. And this is a unit test library that there's a bunch of unit tests that may not be reflective of your testing experience, but it does include a test runner, which is more than what Node.js does right now. Okay, so yeah, so on top of all the speed claims, I think the 3 that he chose to focus on for marketing Bun was essentially 3 of them: server-side rendering React, loading a huge table for SQLite, and then foreign function interfaces. All of them conveniently faster than all the competitors. I think this is where you start to have to think to yourself, like, what do you actually want out of a JavaScript runtime? Which is a ridiculous question because 2 years ago, you probably didn't really think about anything. You just like Node.js is the be all and end all, but now you have a choice. And so do you actually want to server-side render React a lot? Or do you actually want to load a huge table a lot? Like, is that important to you compared to the other things that you have to trade off to get there? So common features between Bun and Deno, of course, run locally, and that's nothing new. I still think that's important. You still want to be able to run and then to deploy the exact same code. HTTP2 support, ESM HTTP imports. This one actually may not be true for Bun. I realized that retroactively. They never actually said that they committed to this. Web APIs. That's an increasingly marketable feature, I guess, which is we view like the node specific APIs for fetching and sockets and the rest of the stuff as a mistake, and that we should try to, as much as possible, stick to the browser interfaces that are a standard. Environment variables, like if you just put in a .env put your environment variables in a .env file. You don't need a separate package to read that. It just comes with the runtime immediately. Out of the box, TypeScript and JavaScript support. So even though standards-wise, TC39 has not really standardized TypeScript or JavaScript, both Bun and Deno have gone ahead and just formalized it anyway. Foreign function interfaces as an option to interop with other languages, and then combined tools. So both runtimes now come with task runners and package managers, linters, formatters, bundlers, and test runners. So just a really, really comprehensive tool set for the new age of JavaScript. Deno's advantages. These are the unique things I can find about Deno. So one, at its core, it runs a V8 isolate, which means you can attach Chrome DevTools. It's got its own file system and server APIs, not that hard to learn. It's designed by the same guy that designed Node.js. It's got web APIs, including, very interestingly, location, as in the URL path, web storage, and workers for threading, which is also super interesting. Permission APIs you may not have seen before because Node.js had no consideration of security. But here you can actually pause for, let me see, how do I click this? So imagine if you can pause for permission. When you're writing a CLI program, you can pause for permission and decide to ask for it. So you can ask for your user to grant you permissions and wait until that person grants you permissions or to cancel. So that is just a nice security so that by default, it doesn't have access to your file system and you don't have like a crypto miner as you install packages or run CLIs. DocsGen, it generates docs for you to well-known formats. It itself has really great docs. One of the most interesting examples I really like. And by the way, I'll show you this running in the future. It's got really nice snippets that you can copy and paste from. It's got really nice example demos that you can do full stack apps with. And I think this is a really well thought through thing. It's got a meta framework that's really well received. Sorry, called Fresh. This is essentially the Next.js of Deno. The primary advantage is this trendy thing called island-based client hydration. In other words, I saw you shaking your head over there. I was like, what the hell is that? By default, most server-side rendering frameworks, including Next.js, they render out the HTML, send the HTML over, then they send the whole JavaScript over, and they render out the exact same thing entirely in React and then swap it out, right? When none of this changes. All of this is JavaScript weight that's being sent over the wire, but it doesn't change. You just have to send the whole thing again for it to be consistent. So the theory of island-based client hydration is, well, we know that none of this changes, so why are we sending that again? We just send the HTML and you're done. No JavaScript beyond that. The only JavaScript that you should send is the stuff that you need to be interactive. That's the island right there. So there are a bunch of other projects that are also involved in that. And if you want to read more, Islands Architecture is the blog post to learn about that by Jason Miller. So it's like these should be interactive. So they're the islands of interactivity. The rest, HTML, we'll just not send it. Makes a lot of sense, but it's obviously a lot more complex when it comes to bundling and server-side rendering. Okay, so what else? It's got language server protocols, all that juicy autocomplete and intelligence, code intelligence inside of your IDE. Deno already has that as part of it. You can run Deno embedded in a Rust app. So if you have a Rust app and you want to offer JavaScript execution, you can just chuck Deno in there. It has a nice third-party ecosystem that's sort of governed by sort of the Deno hosting service. But you can, it's kind of optional. You can choose to host with them if you want, or you can choose your own registry. It's really up to you. And that's part of the benefit of ESM HTTP imports. I can't believe I just said 2 acronyms back to back. One thing I really do like is essentially there's also a standard library. We often knock JavaScript for not having a standard library, but now we have well-documented, like you can see the source and you can sort of browse through the standard library of Deno. Let's look at one like datetime. It's all automatically documented from TypeScript. This is server-side rendered docs from the source. And you can get like isLeap or difference between 2 dates, that kind of stuff. It comes with a full set of standard libraries. This is a bug. He needs to fix that, but essentially there's, you can format strings, you can do file systems, you can do streams. There's all sorts of good stuff that isn't even documented yet, just because it's just so massive. There's such a massive project. And also you have node polyfills. So when you're converting a project from Node.js to Deno, you might find this useful. I don't think it's fully complete. You can see all the partly compatible issues there, but there's some attempt at node compatibility. You can even run Deno to Node. So the argument is, if you just write a Deno compatible package, this Deno to Node tool will make it also usable in Node.js. So your starting point should always just be in Deno, because that's the superset of you can run everywhere. There's a CLI, which we won't go into, and then there's Discord. Okay. Next, the bigger Deno advantage is that there is a venture-backed company, remember, and a hosting service and a cloud service. And that's called Deno Deploy. Every time you deploy a Deno project, it fans out to 34 regions, and it's served from the edge location that is closest to your user. There's a playground editor for you to edit your projects, as well as Git integration. Every single unit, every single deploy is atomic, and you can roll back just by changing your pointers. In fact, upgrading a preview URL to a production URL is just a matter of changing pointers. Like, there is no redeploy, there's no rebuild step. It's that fast. There's organization support, which is good for professional usage. Automatic compression, runtime sockets. This one's interesting. Broadcast channel, which is a lesser known API for communicating between tabs in a browser. They've co-opted that to communicate between regions. So if you need to do, if you have some kind of like global chat app or something and you need to talk between all the regions, you can use that. I think I should demo it a little bit, because I feel like I've been showing you a bunch of slides. So this is Deno, dash.deno.com/new. It's got a whole bunch of different little things. So you can select your own GitHub repos and just deploy it right there. Or you can just choose from one of these. Let's just choose the hello world and deploy it. And that's serving a little hello world server. And you can take this URL. Go ahead and try it. Take this URL and try it out. So it's like snail72. I don't know if I can edit that. Sorry, use React. Let's just go there. All right. We're camping out on the useReact server. So go ahead and try that. Do you all get a hello world? Yeah? Yes? Does anyone have their phone up? Yep. I see thumbs up. All right. And I'm going to change it to hello Deno, and I'm going to save and deploy. All right, go ahead and reload. We got hello Deno. That's the redeploy step. Like, that's it. Because there's no build step, because it's all ES modules, because it's tightly integrated between Deno and Deno deploy. Like, it's a really nice experience. I even like that they have included. So let's go back a little bit to the project. I even like that they've included a JSX example with Tailwind. Because like everything that we've done is in JavaScript. How do you include CSS in there? Honestly, I think they cheated a bit, because essentially what they've done is they included a copy of Tailwind on request whenever they see some Tailwind stuff. But yeah, Tailwind right here. So let me just change this to text red 200. Is that? I hope I got that. Is that? Yeah. So that's Tailwind. Can I get us just a rough poll? There's like maybe like 40, 50 people here. What percent of you who uses Tailwind? Who would like Tailwind? It's about 50%. Nice. So yeah, I mean, to me, it's like the default CSS for React or anything that I use nowadays. Anyway, so it's super impressive integrated environment with the cloud, right? Like, and deploys directly. Like, there's a lot of like, Ryan just runs his own blog just based off of this, and it's pretty impressive. Okay, there's more planned for Deno deploy. But yeah, I mean, it's just a far more progressed. It's a very impressive cloud service, and I was very impressed when I saw it. All right, let's go into Bun. So Bun's main thing, apart from the speed, is Node.js compatibility. You should be able to take most of your Node.js based projects, and people have tried it for Next.js, Remix, and SvelteKit, and be able to port it over to Bun relatively easily. Sometimes you may need an adapter specifically for certain frameworks, but that's the whole point. It's compatible with the npm package registry, and it's compatible with Node libraries. And so, you know, one of the downsides of Deno is that they just decided to break compatibility completely. They were just like, we made all these mistakes 10 years ago. we're not beholden to them. Bun is trying to do that. Bun is bending over backwards to do that and to be fast. It's also got built-in SQLite for a simple little database, and it's got extra bundling support. So when I looked at the docs for Deno's bundling, it didn't really support CSS. Like, importing something.css, that's actually CSS modules. Like, it didn't really support that. And it's got a much smaller ecosystem. There's a small attempt at an Express.js equivalent called Bao.js, because Bao is the Chinese for bun. So it's, again, speed marketing, and it's very early days. There are temporary downsides. So there's no API reference. The docs is just a giant README. That's the docs. And when I tried to deploy it, I was the first person to file the issue. How do you deploy Bun? Oh my God. And these are the Docker files. And I think the collective eventually arrived that this is the way you deploy Bun. Yeah, just a lot of Docker foo needed to get this going. So yeah, very, very early stage. I mean, I have no doubt they were going to solve this, right? And same for this. Like, for Deno, you can brew install Deno. Bun, you have to curl with sudo, and then just pipe it straight to bash. Like, that's just not secure at all. And Next.js is kind of partial. So these are temporary, right? Like, they're going to get fixed. Like, not important. The main thing is prove the speed, right? Bun SQLite is interesting. It's the first time I've seen, Node.js, you're just used to not having persistence. You can just write to a file. I guess that's kind of it. But here there's embedded SQLite. And I think that's a fantastic use case of SQLite. And now we all have to learn SQL, which I don't think is a downside. All right, let's talk about the contributors. Deno is a community. Bun is a one-man show. That's what the charts show over there. So I mean, I think you should think about the governance carefully about the projects that you adopt. Deno not only has governance and a core team worked out, they have the benefit of 10 years of Node behind them in order to do this. Whereas Bun is one person's side project. Well, sorry, I take that back. Bun is one person's project, and he hasn't really worked out the core contributor team part. So the race is on. Deno's been around for 4 years, and that's the star chart graph. And Bun has gone vertical, but that's after a lot of marketing for the launch. So he executed that launch really well. We don't really know what this will look like in 3 or 4 years. And there's one more player on the way. It's kind of weird for me to say that there's one more player that's coming soon, because Cloudflare Workers actually was announced 5 years ago, but they were not open source. And so in comparison, nobody's really adopted it as much, or you can't really use them as a runtime locally. So, but they have an interesting innovation, which is they have Workers KV, Workers Durable Objects. So Workers KV is for eventually consistent stores. You just get and set as a KV store. And then for durable objects, you declare a durable object, and this is strongly consistent persistent storage. And then on top of those things, they built D1, which is their embedded SQLite option. So what will 2025 look like? A few hours ago, I actually tweeted out a poll for just like, where are people at? So most people do not have an opinion, which is very smart. But some people, the rest of them, 70% of people will happily tell you their opinion anyway. So 29% Bun, 18% Cloudflare workers, 21% Cloudflare workers, and 18% Deno, which is kind of sad for Deno for working for 4 years and then now being third place in terms of the straw poll. But this is not scientific anyway. But what is for sure is that the thesis of collapsed layers is happening. The fact I like to throw out to people is that word processors, when they first came out, did not come with, this is a blog post by Benedict Evans, check it out. It's a fantastic blog post. Word processors, when they came out, did not have footnotes, did not have word counts, did not have horizontal print layouts, because all those were plugins. You had to buy them separately for like $30, $50 a pop, and then plug it into your word processor, because that was not the job of the word processor. Now, 50 years on, like we know that that's the part of the job, and now that just kind of ships all together. Like all these functionality used to be plugins. And I think essentially what's the same thing's happening to JavaScript tooling. And 10 years ago, all of these tools used to come separately. We used to believe in the Unix philosophy of every tool should do one thing well. But now we just realize that all of these tools are just needed in every single setup. So we should have one opinionated set of tools that come together and work well together. So the collapsed layer thesis, Deno actually has something on their docs to show this, to map things you know versus the Deno equivalent. So for example, ESLint is now DenoLint, Prettier is now Deno format, TypeDoc is DenoDoc, Jest is now DenoTest. What else is interesting? I just really like they have docsgen. Like, can you imagine your runtime like caring so much about docs that they that they generate this for you? Where's DenoDoc? Oh yeah, TypeDoc right there. Okay, all right, cool. Bun, again, the docs are not there, but if you go through all the instructions, you're like, okay, this is the equivalent. So they don't have nearly as much functionality, but also they're much younger. The second thing after the collapsed layers thing is that probably edge-first rendering and databases will be a thing. Like you will want this for your users because it just makes sense to serve them as quickly as possible. One of the interesting tweets I saw from today talking about Bun was like, this is the first time, I live in India, this is the first time a page is loaded under 1 second for me. And that's just because you'll serve from the edge. We should make this a norm. And we should render from the edge as much as possible. And that's something that Deno definitely strongly believes in. Bun does, and by the way, Deno deploy is an edge-first story. Bun is not. Bun is a single binary that you probably run on a server somewhere. There is no edge runtime that they have worked out yet. But it's probably very likely that that is their next step. They're just 4 years behind. What else? Yeah, so you want this to be your availability zone instead of having to choose one location. You just want to deploy everywhere at once. Third opinion, JavaScript containers, which is essentially we used to ship VMs, then we shipped containers, and now we ship isolates. And every time you do that, you have order of magnitude improvement in cold start time, and you have order of magnitude improvement in the amount of, the number of instances per physical machine, and therefore order of magnitude improvement in the cost. And this is the first time, my first observation of this happened when Netlify shipped their sort of pricing for the Deno functions capability that they had. And Deno functions are cheaper than normal functions. And this is unusual if you're familiar with AWS function pricing. AWS Lambda at edge is 3 times more expensive than AWS Lambda. So this is an inversion from edge being more expensive to edge being cheaper. I think it went from like 3 times more expensive to 25 times cheaper. That's a 75x improvement because of this stuff. So you really want to think about, like, a lot of people push back on this. If you read the Hacker News post on this, Hacker News comments on this blog post, they were like, yeah, I mean, like, if you believe JavaScript is the future, then yes, you can go ahead and strip out everything else. So those are the people who are not betting on JavaScript. But if you agree that you should always bet on JavaScript, then this is the future. And the final opinion is FSAS, which is functions as a service, meaning what if every tech company could let you have a programmable edge? And that is essentially what Deno is doing. That's their go-to-market. Deno has a functionality called sub-hosting, where essentially they offer you the ability to offer programmable workers to your customers. The Slack actually has this. Where is the Slack API? They call this flexible automation for everyone. And basically, they let you write functions that run within Slack that doesn't really have a server, but it's actually Deno under the hood. So imagine if you could program the edge of every single app. That is kind of the promise. And I think that is my last slide. So yeah, that's it. If you want more from me, I run a DevTools blog, DX Tips. I have a personal blog, and then I have a book for career advice. Follow these projects, deno.com and bun.sh. And thanks very much.
Give it up to Swyx.